We just jumped right into it. So I wanted to bring you up to date on a couple of things, and then we'll get into our topic of the day. Markna is moving along nicely. It's going to happen on September 9th on this YouTube channel. It will be a 24-hour event, which means there will be 24 in a row presentations from 9 a.m. all the way to 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. And it is going to be fun. I've already lined up 12 of the 24 speakers. They are from different parts of the world. It's going to be great. If you're asleep at some point, there's people in the other part of the world that are awake and they're finally tuning in during their daylight hours. They're going to love that. I felt like doing an international show was the best thing I could do versus trying to focus on America only. So it's going to be epic. And I've already got a couple of people I'm going to be interviewing in person. We're going to do others online, of course. But it's just going to be a lot of fun. And then between each presentation, there will be raffle prizes with you have a chance to win stuff. And the money you're using to buy raffle tickets will be to help support Coral Restoration Foundation. I signed the contract with them yesterday to make sure everything's legal. And so any money that's raised for the raffle will go to them. Other than that, it's still a work in progress. The website will keep getting updated. Right now, there's still placeholders. But eventually it'll be all the right people, all the right descriptions, and all the information for you. So you can go to markna.com to find out all the details. We probably won't even start selling raffle tickets for a couple more weeks as we get that part figured out. But we want to make sure everything is going to be easy to navigate, so hold off just a little bit longer. I do appreciate the excitement that people have been saying they want to get involved in this, and we already have one sponsor that has said they want to commit to this, which is great. Need 19 more. So hopefully that will happen because we want to make sure this is a really good polished event and we want to make sure we have enough money to cover everything that's being done so that it goes really, really smoothly. I've got big plans and I think you'll have a great time. And I should mention the reason that I'm doing a Markna this year is because there's no Macna. But there is one happening in 2024. Yeah, it's going to be way up in the future. No, next year, there's going to be one next year. And so we will be actually having people on from Asna during Markna to promote Macna. So it's all going to work out. We're all working together. It's a friendly situation. There's no drama. There's no issues whatsoever. We just want to have something successful and fun and fill the void that was Macna this year because I hate not having one. So it's unacceptable. We're going to do it. All right, let me turn this off. Reef Trace is an app that I'm going to be doing videos about as soon as I can get to it to show you how to use the app. It's got some really cool features. I've been a partner in it for, I'd say 3+ years. And it allows me to track my water parameters and see the graphs so I can trend everything. It also lets me collect all my, whatever I'm doing in the log area, which is the best part for me because I can go through the list, I can take a picture of what I'm doing, put it in there, and I can say what I did, when I did it, and how I did it. And so it lets me break things up into cleanings, replenishing, adding new. There's like 9 different choices. And then of course the LFS locator that's built in lets you find any fish stores within your area within 45 miles. And you can move that marker to where you're gonna go to see what's near that spot as well. And I find these are really practical. And then of course Creature ID is built in and it's got some really nice data to explain each animal. So if you're looking for a resource, you can have all this on your phone, whether it's iPhone or Android, and you should have it. Also, Coral Magazine. I am pushing that everyone subscribe to Coral Magazine. It is something that I have been reading for many years. I probably have 12 years worth of magazines here. And the magazine, it's a matter of fact, why don't I have it handy when I need it? I gotta tell you, I was reading through this latest issue and it talked about James Lawrence. He has been the tip of the mountain when it comes to Coral Magazine. He's the one that wanted to bring it to the United States and has been publishing it quietly. And what they wrote in that magazine was so to the point, poignant, that, I'm sure I said that wrong, that I want to share that with you. Let me go get it. I just want to get it. Jack is being a really good girl today. Here's our issue that I'm talking about. Rabbit fishes, and right here in the beginning, it said, gotta find the right person that wrote it. Oh, where did it go? It was such a good point. Here we go. Coral is where the world's most enthusiastic reef keepers collide with marine biologists and professional public aquarists. It's an exciting form that works at many levels, even for newcomers. There's an element of being on the unpredictable cutting edge that I, as a reader, always love. I find that world-renowned scientist and t-shirted livestock manager at my local fish store both have the same respect for the same magazine. It's quite extraordinary. And that's from Rhett Talbot. He is a published author. He is a marine reporter, and he has written many articles for Coral, and so he was writing a nice write-up about James that was featured in this magazine. So I highly recommend you get this. It comes out every 2 months, so you get six issues a year, and I've had a couple of articles in here myself. I have had my pictures in here a few times, and I've had my reef featured in this magazine as well in the past. So I would highly recommend you get a subscription. It's not hard to get, and they even have a digital version that you can subscribe to where you don't have to actually get one mailed to you that's made out of paper. Now, I prefer to hold it, but I totally understand wanting to open it up on a tablet or an iPad or something like that, or on your computer desktop. So if you buy the paper edition, it comes digital. If you just want digital, that's fine too. I think that is no problem at all to get. I think that they sell those separately. So, okay. Let's talk about our topic for today. Oh, and also, I have some issues in my store at all times where you can buy a copy if you'd like. And currently I have about 6 different issues on hand with, a few of each one. So if you want to add it to your next order, you definitely can at melovesreef.com. Okay, so adding sand to an aquarium, I came across a thread today, or actually I think it started last night, where the person was asking, I want to put sand in my aquarium, is there a safe way, is it going to cause any problems? And I've never had any problem adding sand to an aquarium, whether it was a brand new tank or an existing reef. So I thought we'd get into that for a few minutes. This isn't a long topic, we'll be quick and then we'll jump into your questions and I'll see what I can answer for you today. And then I will get on to answering other things because my day is always filled. But let's say you've got a brand new aquarium and you bought a bunch of sand to put in it. Now, where did you buy the sand? I would highly recommend you buy aquarium sand sold at a fish store. That is the best choice versus buying something at Home Depot. Many years ago, a friend of mine thought, I'm not going to spend that kind of money. I can get a bag of sand for $5 at Home Depot. And he had nothing but problems and he had things dying. And it's because that play sand that may look okay in your aquarium was not reef safe whatsoever, and he had inverts dying, he had fish dying, and he ended up pulling out all that sand. So he had twice the work because he set up a tank, went through the cycle, put in the livestock, experienced some losses, finally agreed it had to be the sand, had to scoop out all the wet sand, add new sand, lose more livestock. It was quite the ordeal. So if you can buy sand, and of course you can order it from Amazon or whatever, but make sure it's made for aquariums. That's my point. I wouldn't just try to find something on the side. Now, many years ago, and I'd say probably 20 years ago, it was all the rage to get something called Southdown sand, which I believe was probably used for making concrete. It was aragonite-based, and which is calcium-based. I'm sorry, aragonite sand. No, it is aragonite-based. It's a sand that you could put in vinegar, and if it tried to dissolve, you knew it was the right one. And it was very, very fine. It was oolitic, so it was like dust. And the principle was that if you had a deep sand bed, which was 4 to 6 inches, or if you ask Dr. Ron Shemek, 6 to 12 inches of sand, which is a lot, if you had that much sand in there, it would denitrify the water, and you wanted this super fine sand. The problem with this sand was that it was really easy to fluff up. You're just cleaning in the tank, and poof, you have this cloud, and it just got everywhere, and it clogged up the view, and you had to clean the glass, but you couldn't trap any of the sand between your magnet and the glass, or it would definitely scratch your tank. It was quite the ordeal. And I used it briefly, because I was part of a group buy where our club ordered, 2 or 3 pallets of the stuff. And then, everyone got their, whatever, 2 bags, 6 bags, 12 bags, depending on the size of their aquarium. And they would go ahead and put this in their aquarium, and they tried to rinse, and you just couldn't get it clean enough, and your tank ended up being cloudy. Now, here's a helpful tip. If you use live rock. If you have a tank that you've set up that becomes cloudy, as soon as you add live rock, that tank will clear up in 6 to 12 hours. It is very fast. It's amazing what live rock can do to clarify water. Where if you were to just say, I'm not going to put any rock and I'm going to wait for this cloud storm to go away, it could be 3 to 5 days of waiting for it to all settle out. But as soon as you disturb it, it becomes cloudy again. So that's why I only did south down for a very brief period. After that, I decided to just go with something, usually it was Carib Sea, and then when I set up my 400 gallon, I was able to buy something called Tropic Eden, which is still available from companies like Premium Aquatics as far as I know, and they had a type of sand that they named Reef Flakes, and it was 3 millimeters in size, and I am still, to this day, 13 years later, using the exact same sand in my aquarium, and when I needed to break down the tank because it leaked, I took all that sand out and I washed it really well, and I put it in bags so I could put it back in the new aquarium. And then when I had a temporary tank set up for the livestock during the switch of tanks, I had sand in that tank and I had to take that out and wash it out. And then when I broke down the anemone cube, I took that sand out to wash it out. I reuse sand forever. Sand is forever. But if you're in a situation where the sand is just kind of vanishing, which can happen, it can kind of, let's just say, melt away. And what's happening is the sand is, depending how deep you make it. If it's shallow, you're not going to experience as much. But if you have a deeper sand bed, the lower level is anoxic, which is low oxygen. And the low oxygen creates this melting point where the sand actually starts to dissolve away a little bit, just a tiny bit. And originally they said south down will help with buffering your tank and keep that alkalinity where you need it to be. But it really wasn't a great substitute for something like kalkwasser or dosing 2-part. But it was thought it could be helpful, and so you should use it. Like I said, I switched over to Reef Flakes. Didn't care about the possibility of buffering, but I definitely liked that it didn't blow around under my Vortec pumps. That was something very important to me because those I'm listening to the train and wondering how much you can hear. They don't just go by, they honk their horn incessantly. Anyway, the different sands we used, you'd have power heads that would blow it everywhere, and Reef Flake tended to stay where you needed to be, which was great. And I could clean the glass as much as I wanted, and it would just kind of kick up a little bit and immediately sink to the bottom. That was perfect, and I loved using that. But if it started to melt away, I said, well, I'm just going to put more sand in. So here's the thing. Here's how I would add sand to another aquarium. And I've seen other methods like using, well, I'll just describe them. You've got one method or one recommendation is that you take a PVC pipe that's probably 2 inches in diameter. I'm sure people use 1.5 inches because that's usually what they have laying around in their garage. But 2 inches, 3 inches, something big enough that you can pour down the chute and have it hit the bottom of the tank. And that way you can kind of direct where you want the sand to be. I understand that, but I think I might have tried that once and said, what a pain in the butt. Because those bags are not light. So you almost need a second person to hold the pipe while you're holding the bag with 2 hands and you've cut off the corner and you're drizzling it down through this pipe trying to get it where you want it to be. That just didn't work for me. It's way too labor intensive. For me, it was much easier to add the sand directly to the aquarium. So, in an existing reef tank, what I do is I turn off all the flow. No vortex, no return pump, just stagnant water, okay? Just let it be still. And then I take the bag of sand that it came, as it came packaged, and I wipe off all the outside really well with a wet towel to just wipe away any kind of pollutants that could possibly affect my aquarium. Then I cut off the top of the bag so that it's open, and I invert it inside the tank. So I'm lowering in the tank and I've kind of pinched it shut with my hand, and when I get to the bottom, so the open part is near the base of the aquarium, and of course there's a whole bag of sand above it, then I'll just lift the bag up and let the sand drizzle out, and I could kind of scooch it back and forth a little bit. And because I'm the king of leaving corals on my sand bed, I had to of course move those corals out of the way for what I was about to do, and I'd dump the entire bag of sand into the bottom of the tank, and then I would smooth it out and rearrange my corals back on top of my nice clean sand. That worked every time. I never got a dust storm from it. It was no cloudy issues whatsoever. And I've done this. I probably had to do that twice a year with a 280-gallon reef to replenish what was lacking. I probably had to put in 1 or 2 bags every 6 months, and I ran that tank for 6 years. The 400-gallon, I haven't done that much. You know, there's been a couple of times where I had excess sand and I went ahead and put some in, or I reached in and kind of rearranged the sand inside my aquarium. Now, if you're putting sand in your aquarium and it's washed out sand that you have in buckets, I highly recommend you take the sand out of the buckets and put them in some kind of unscented white trash bags like you have for your kitchen trash can. You know, those tall, what are they, 13-gallon trash cans? Just fill those bags with sand and then carry the bag over to your aquarium and then dump it out into, and this is, I'm talking about now, I've switched gears. Now I'm talking about a brand new aquarium that you're setting up for the first time. If you have, let's say you said, okay, I'm upgrading. I had 120 in the past. I washed all my sand. I'm setting up 180 now. And you've got all this sand just sitting in buckets. It's all been washed out. It's ready to use. Don't take the bucket and pour it into your tank, because you could do what I did. I had this brand new, beautiful Starfire 400-gallon tank, and on day one, as I'm adding the sand in, and I thought I was making sure that the bucket wouldn't touch the glass, so I was being very careful as I was dumping the sand into the tank, the metal handle on the bucket was rubbing on the glass panel. It was just like grinding in, just left this gouge right in the front, dead center of the glass for the rest of my life. I was so mad at myself, and I just couldn't believe it. Now, I got lucky that 13 months later, the tank was leaking and they had to replace it. But day one, I had a giant scratch in my glass on the front. Not on the back, not on the end, no. And it wasn't near the sand, it was right there at eye level. You couldn't miss it. Every time you tried to take a picture, there was a scratch in the middle of the shot. So frustrating. So transfer that clean sand into trash bags or pitchers or something that's made of all plastic, or, you know, like I said, plastic bags that you can lower in the tank and you can just go ahead and, you know, pour out. We don't want to dump the sand in hard because the bottom of the tank could potentially crack with a big impact. So a lot of people would just take the bag themselves, if they bought Carib Sea, for example, and they'd put it in the bottom of the tank, and then they cut the bag open and just invert it and just pour the sand out cleanly. But like I said, if you're using washed sand you're going to reuse, we want to be really careful putting in the tank so we don't damage the aquarium itself, we don't scratch the glass at all, and we have a successful addition of sand. Now, how do you avoid cloudy water once you've got sand in the brand new tank? That's when we want to add water into the aquarium in a very controlled way. So one trick that is super easy to do, and you can use all the things you have in your house already, get yourself a big black trash bag and just lay it across the sand bed so it covers the whole thing. Then get your big platter you use to serve turkeys on for Thanksgiving and put that on top of the plastic bag that's on top of the sand, and then get some kind of a pot or a vase and put that on top of the platter. And now you can pump water into the vase that'll overflow into the platter, that'll overflow onto the bag, and the water will just rise and it will have barely any cloudiness at all. You will just have water and it'll be a little milky as it comes upward. And then once you've got enough water in the tank to where, you have to decide what's best for you, but really, once the tank's about 50% full, 60% full, 70% full, you can at this point remove all that stuff and just add water to the water, and you won't be disturbing the sand because it's so many inches down lower away from the blast of water going in. If you're trickling it in with an RO system, it's even easier because it's going in so slowly you could cry. But I prefer to put salt water in a new aquarium rather than fresh water. So for me, I would never use RO water to fill a tank. It would drive me bonkers. I would always fill up different barrels, and I'd mix up the barrels to the right salinity, and then I would pump that salt water into the aquarium on top of my new sand, my plastic bag, my platter, my vase, and I'd fill the tank up. And then once it was filled to wherever I needed it to be, like I said, I removed all that stuff, and I pumped in the rest of the water. And if you want, you can go, it depends what's going on with your plumbing, but let's say you've got the plumbing done, the sump is ready, everything's in place. You can keep adding water until it fills up to the top to overflow and go down the drains, and then from the drains down into the sump, and make sure there's enough water in the sump to where you can activate the return pump and get that going. The initial 24 hours while you're water testing your plumbing, you don't need to have the Vortex or the Jabos or the Gyres or anything like that running. All we want to do is have the return pump going. And if you would like, if you feel like you see stuff floating around in the water that concerns you, you could rig up some kind of a filter sock in your sump to capture as much of this sediment that's floating around to reduce any cloudiness that occurs. Then you're going to introduce live rock or dry rock to your aquarium, and at that point you may need to remove some water from the sump so that the sump isn't so full that it's going to overflow, because you've displaced water. First of all, you had sand in there, right? And then you put in the water, so there's a fixed amount of water. Once you put in all that rock that displaces more water, your sump is going to be too full. So we want to reduce the water level to the correct level in the sump, that if you were to unplug the return pump, the sump doesn't overflow. And if you did all that correctly, you should be good to go. And within another day or so, your water should be nice and crystal clear. You might say, hey, it still looks a little cloudy, Mark. What happened? Clean the glass now. Because there may be really fine dust on the glass. And you clean it like, hey, it's actually clean. It's clear. It's right. So that's me. I don't rinse brand new aquarium sand. I can't say the word. Aquarium sand because typically it's already pre-rinsed for us in the bags. And that goes for Tropic Eden or for Carib Sea. Both those sands have always worked really well for me. Tropic Eden had weird pieces of plastic inside the sand. It had to do with packaging the sand. And I think it was those bags that they packed it in, little slivers of it would somehow get into the sand itself in the next one that's getting bagged up. And you end up pulling out a few weird, like, what can I call that? You just had these weird like ribbons of plastic, really skinny, like it was designed to be packing material. And that stuff would just creep up and you just pick out the little ones that you see. But, and then I know specifically Carib Sea's live sand comes with a packet that has some kind of a water clarifier, and I think it has some kind of bacteria in it as well. And you would add that to the aquarium at that point to let it help get things established. Now, I want to talk about the myth that live sand is bogus and it's a ripoff and all that. It's not. It's just, if you could, as a matter of fact, I went and asked Judd over at Carib Sea, you know, what can you tell me about live sand to prove to me that it's alive, even though it's been in warehouses in a sealed bag, you know, where it's been baked all summer long. It goes on a semi-truck that's hot, drives across the nation, it goes to the fish store, sits on their shelf for 9 months till I pick up a bag and buy it. And he said, it's waiting for oxygen. And as soon as you open up the bag, oxygen gets in and the dormant bacteria comes to life. I was like, aha, I can work with that. So that was nice to know. And listen, every time I've ever used a new bag of live sand, every single time, I have watched these weird like snowflakes appear on my glass in the first week, I think it is. And they're only there for about 2, possibly 3 days. They're really neat. They're all over the place. They're microscopically small. Occasionally some person with an incredible macro lens would take a great picture of one. And that's in my Creature ID on my website if you want to see what it looks like. But it is a type of non-swimming hydroid. And it kind of looks like a little jellyfish. Or non-motile jellyfish. I think that's what it is. And if you take a cleaning magnet and you swipe them all away, it feels like 20 seconds later, they're right back where they were. It's really neat. They want to be attached to the sides, but then they just kind of vanish. So you get to enjoy the snowflakes for a couple of days, and then they're gone. Where would they come from if everything in the bag was dead? Okay, that's my proof positive that it's real. So I don't rinse away the good stuff in my new live sand that I paid for. I want that stuff. And when I did Tropic Eden sand, I had lots of bags of dry sand. And then I bought their live sand as well to seed the dry sand. And when I received it on a pallet, I was really surprised. I had these weird trays that look like you would buy chicken or steak or sausage. You know, these plastic trays with like the foil you peel off the top, and inside was my live sand. And I think I bought 16 or 20 or 24 bags of sand and like 12 trays of live sand. And I put the live sand all on top to get it all going. I didn't want to put the live sand in first and then bury it under dry sand because that'll murder it. So that goes back to where I was talking to you earlier about adding more sand to an existing reef tank. If you want to avoid smothering the good bacteria in your sand bed, you only want to add enough sand per session that adds a ½ inch to your sand bed. So if you have a 90-gallon aquarium and you're trying to put sand in there, and your bag that you're holding is going to add quite a bit, you know, add half a bag and spread that out to where it's just a ½ inch taller. And that way all the stuff in the sand, I'm trying to think of the word. Well, the microfauna is close enough. That stuff can migrate up to the upper ½ inch, which is perfect. You want that to happen. Then a week from now, you can add another ½ inch, or and once a week you can add ½ inch till you get to that desired height, and that works perfectly. And I never had a problem. And sand, live sand, dead sand, doesn't matter. The dry sand stuff, none of that will ever cycle a tank. I need to emphasize that because I see people post that all the time, and it's not true. Sand doesn't cycle a tank. There's nothing in the sand that can create a cycle. There's no ammonia. There's no decay and die-off. It's sand. So don't fear that you're going to cycle your tank adding sand, because you won't. Now, if you bury all your good bacteria under a huge layer of new sand, your tank's just going to kind of go through this weird moment, but it's not cycling. It's more like dealing with, I'm trying to think of scientifically what would occur, but you are definitely going to wipe out your good bacteria underneath, and we don't want to do that because we want to keep everything running. We want to keep all the corals growing. We want to keep the fish happy. So just do things in small sections. Now let's go the opposite extreme. What if you don't want sand in your tank anymore? What is the best bet? Normally, the best advice people give is to remove 1/4 of the sand bed at a time. And so you would just siphon that out with a hose and just work it into a nearby bucket or something nearby, and you remove about 25% of your sand, and then the next week you take another 25, and next week, and finally after a month you have removed all the sand bed and the tank never skipped a beat. People are often scared to even touch the sand bed, and they feel like you can't disturb it because you'll release some horrible chaos that's down deep inside there, and that's not super common. Can happen, but it hasn't happened to me once in all these years. I've had to break down huge systems that were running for many years, and I've never come across like a big sulfuric black patch in the sand bed. But if I did, I'd be working fast to suck all that out as fast as I possibly could, and then I'd run some carbon, and I'd have some fresh salt water ready, because of course, like I said, it could happen, and obviously you should be aware. But usually, anytime I've had to clean out an aquarium, one that's been running for many years, I would scoop out the sand, and I'm looking at the sand as I'm scooping, and it's just usually filled with brown detritus. Brown is fine, black is bad, and if you smell sulfur, really bad. So if you're in a situation where you're just having to break down some really old tank, and if you're really expecting to hit some sulfuric stuff, I would remove the livestock first and put it in a safe container, whether it's an aquarium or a Rubbermaid vat or some kind of a plastic bin, with an air stone and a small heater that matches that size of water volume, and then you can go work on the tank and really clean it out. Let's say you have an acrylic tank and it's really scratched up, and you're getting it polished, and it has to be completely bone dry and cleaned out before they show up to work on it, or before you tear it down to work on it yourself. Then you're going to move the livestock anyway, and at that point you'd be removing all of the sand all at once, and you would discover whatever's going on. Now, if you have a big, ugly, black sulfuric patch, don't even try to wash that. Just throw that away. It's done, and enjoy what's left of your sand, because the rest of it is still good. The sulfur doesn't go everywhere. It's in one area, and it's very rare that it happens, but it can. It can happen occasionally, and I've seen pictures, so I know it's real, but it's not something that the average hobbyist should expect to happen with their aquarium. Let me see. If for some reason the sand in your tank ever turns hard, and that can happen, it can just turn into a brick. It's very strange. It's happened to me once in my 215-gallon aquarium, and I know for a fact, do not break it up to try to reuse it. Once it's turned into a hardened crystal, just pick up that whole section and throw it away, and let's add some new sand to replace what was lost. That's the simplest solution. I have found that if you try to be stubborn and you try to salvage that, like hit it with a hammer, I'll break it up into little grains again so I can use it again, something bad is in that right there. I don't know what it is. All I know is my livestock started going downhill, and I knew immediately, well, what changed? What had I done recently? And the one thing that I had done was try to reuse something that had hardened, and it was just a mistake. So I quickly learned not to do that. I started recommending to others not to do that, and it has averted any kind of disasters in aquariums. So you want to keep that in mind. And also, let's say your tank has sand in it and it's covered in cyano, and you say, look, I'm just going to siphon it all out and put new sand in. You definitely could. You could do that. You could start with a fresh bag of sand. That's true. But the cyano might still happen because cyanobacteria always exists. It exists in fresh water, brackish water, and salt water, and it's always there. It's been around for millions of years. There was an article that came out, a couple of 3 years ago, where they had dug down some crazy deep strata in the earth and found an entire pocket of cyanobacteria. I was like, it's everywhere. So it's normal. It exists in the water. But the only time we dislike it is when it turns red and becomes a blanket. The rest of the time, while it's invisible, you don't care that it exists and it's not evil. It's just, once it becomes that blanket, it's an eyesore and it can grow right over something very quickly and smother it. And you might lose a plate coral, you could lose a clam, some kind of fish might suffer from it, some animals might try to eat it and poison themselves. I mean, there's that kind of stuff can and is reported, but usually the simplest cure to get rid of cyano is ChemiClean or Red Cyano RX. But let's say you want to just siphon it all out, and then you're putting in new sand. You're like, well, I still have this sand. It's just red. I'll just wash it out. Washing it out is fine. You can wash it out. You can lay it out in the sun to dry. You can bag it up for the future for when you want to use that sand again. There's nothing wrong with that. The one thing I don't want you to do is put it in a pot and boil it. Because people do the craziest things. And if you're boiling the cyanobacteria, you're going to be inhaling it next. So we want to make sure that whenever we're rinsing something or we're cleaning something, that we're very aware of our environment around us. You're washing the sand outside. You're rinsing it with a garden hose of cold water. So number one, no steam, right? You are rinsing it around. If you are one of those people that seems to get sick from anything, maybe you should wear a face mask to help avoid inhaling any particles, okay? But I've never needed to do that. I just washed the sand, moved my arm round and round in it till the water got full of detritus, and I tilted the bucket over, dumped out the brownish water until I was almost about to pour out the sand, stood it up again, added more water, sloshed it around and around, and I kept doing that until the water ran clear. Then that batch of sand was clean. I could use it in my aquarium. That is the best bet. We just want to avoid doing things where we could accidentally inhale it. And so that's why I would say stay away from the stove or the barbecue or your propane torch. We don't have to kill it like that. I know it sounds fun, kill it with fire, but we don't, unfortunately, those kind of incidents end up with, the Darwin Awards, and we don't want to end up as one of those recipients. We want to be really smart and careful. That's pretty much all the things I have to say about adding sand to an aquarium. See, I told you it was going to be a short and quick and easy one. Let's go to your questions and see if there's anything that I can answer here. And then, of course, you can ask anything else as well. I think that'll be a lot of fun. I will put a link to an article I wrote many years ago on Reef Addicts. That's my other website. And I'll put it in this video's description where you can see pictures of how I added the sand to my 280-gallon reef. That was a really pretty tank. And so you can kind of see step by step and see how it worked. And it's really simple. Once that sand was added to the tank and it was all leveled out again, I could just turn the pumps back on. And, the whole thing took 15, 20 minutes. It wasn't a big ordeal. Triggerfish, you say you still can't add the local fish or even after the update on Reef Trace. Can you send me an email that I can forward to them and we'll make sure that that store gets added? Let's see. I haven't found a question yet. That's why I'm being quiet. FishFam Link says that everyone should give this video a thumbs up. Your medic says, I use Red Sea salt. The tank is an LPS Softy aquarium. The salt says not to mix for longer than 4 hours. What am I losing if I keep the salt water in my large container and mixing until I need it? Rather than mixing, how about just a really small power head to create a little tiny bit of circulation versus, something that's really churning the water like a tornado. If you could reduce that, I'm sure it'd be all right. You may discover that over time your alkalinity in that salt water you haven't used yet may be dropping, and that could be one of the reasons why they want you to mix it and use it within a 4-hour window. Because there's others like me that make 250 gallons of water at a time, and then I use it over the next month to 2 months. I use it, a little bit here, a little bit there, a decent water change here. I give away a few frags, and some water goes away. I have to put a little bit in my tank. It's that kind of thing. So if you are using your salt water over a period of time, like I do, always double check the alkalinity before you do your water change. And if it's low, buffer it up, wait 20 minutes, double check the number. And if it matches your reef, now it's totally safe to use. Shaker Breakers Reef says, what about dinoflagellates? Well, if your tank has dinoflagellates, you're kind of up a creek that is really difficult to overcome. I've never had to actually fight it tooth and nail like so many people have. And I'm going to guess it's because I use live rock and live sand. But there is a group on Facebook, the dinoflagellate support group, and the first thing they will tell you is if you have anything like that in your tank, to get a microscope and zoom in on it and get a good picture and post that in the group so they can identify the type you have so they can help you solve the problem. But you're not going to want to add any more new sand to a tank that has dinos. You're really not going to want to siphon dinos out, even though you want to. It's one of those, I would siphon it out left and right. I would siphon and siphon and siphon. That's what I would do, because I always want to remove the majority of the problem from the tank so it's down to just a little bit, and then resolve the last of it. I did have a hint of dinos once. I came home with a gorgonian from Florida along with 25 other frags. It was a purple gorgonian, and it was about 12 inches tall. And it was insane. I was walking past this table at a frag swap while I was there, and these gorgonians were $5. $5 for a coral that was 12 inches tall. And it was in a skinny little bag, just like 2 inches wide, just like the balloons they twist to make balloon animals. It was one of those bags just filled with the gorgonian and a solid tube of water. And I was like, I was not going to buy any corals while I was here because I just want to go home. I don't have to fight TSA or any of that stuff. But I was like, I'm buying that gorgonian. $5, that's crazy. And then I ended up buying 12 other frags while I was there because now I'm bringing home livestock. And I came home with that gorgonian and everything else, put it in my little quarantine tank, and then after a while I got it in the reef. And then I noticed my gorgonian turned dark brown. And it was stringy. And it looked like dinoflagellates, actually. And I thought, well, that's weird. So because it was so new in my tank, I had grabbed a bucket and put it next to the tank, and I drained 5 gallons of water out of the tank into the bucket. It was a white bucket. And I took the gorgonian by the base, and I inverted it into the water, and I swirled it round and round and round, and just the brown stuff came flying off of it. Just looked like a tornado of brown strings. It was so disgusting. And the coral was perfectly purple again, and I put it back in the tank. And I threw that water away and refilled my tank 5 gallons. And then a week later, it was kind of brown again, and I pulled it out again and did this again to clean it off. And I thought, man, I can't keep doing this. There's no way this coral's going to survive me manhandling and swirling it around like this once a week and grabbing it. It's just, I got to leave it alone. But after those 2 treatments, I got lucky. It never took hold. It didn't spread anywhere else. It didn't do anything. That was my big fight with dinoflagellates. And there's a chance in a previous tank I had some growing in my refugium in an area of low flow. I had this weird bubbly stuff on the surface of the water, and it just looked disgusting. Super slimy, but it was on the surface, so I couldn't see if it was going to be that stringy stuff that looks like snot. But I just took a big, huge spoon from the kitchen, one of those ladles, and I pressed it down into the water enough, because the ladle's dry, right? And I pressed it down into the water so water would start tipping into it. And as I did that, the slimy, snotty stuff went into the spoon, and I dumped that into a little bucket, and I did it again, and I did it again, and I basically surface skimmed all that away. And then I made sure all my plants were down low enough that water could move across the top cleanly and not be stagnant. And again, didn't have a problem. So I tend to remove things, but that group probably won't recommend it. Randy Holmes Farley many years ago talked about dinoflagellates, and he said one of the things that you should never do when you have dinos is change water. And I thought, well, that's insane. How are you going to get rid of the problem? And he said because, and there's a huge article you can read written by him in reefkeeping.com, but he said that what it does is it just, whatever's in your new water is fueling the dinos and they grow even worse. So rule number 1 was not to change any water. Kill all the lights for weeks on the aquarium. I mean, it was really bad. And so typically people would be rescuing livestock out of the tank. Then they'd cocoon the tank in cardboard or plastic, and no lights, circulation only. They tried to raise the pH up to like 8.5 and keep it there nonstop. And they tried to battle it out, and it would take weeks or months to get the tank back to a clean state. And it was, again, it was like the sulfur. It was very few people that had this problem. I mean, it was like 1 in 1,000 had dinoflagellates. Like, how did you even do that? Because it was such a weird thing. And now it's like everyone has dinoflagellates. And I have to attribute it to these clean, sterile tanks. You guys are just terrified of everything coming from the ocean, and the ocean's full of good things too. I mean, nature finds a way, everything balances itself out, and putting in rock from the ocean, live rock, that is aquaculture. We're not stripping the reefs, we're not killing off the good stuff out there. But getting rock that is sold in this industry for your aquarium is okay. And yeah, you might get some pests. Oh well, you're gonna get them anyway. You're gonna get pests anyway. They will come in on the side of a fish, on the side of a coral, off of anything you ever touch. I'm telling you, it's impossible to never have a pest. I understand you never want one. I understand you're terrified of them. Don't be terrified. Very few are the nightmare that will ruin your life. Very few. They're just a pain in the butt. Bubble algae. It's a nuisance, okay? Hair algae, it's a nuisance. Red bugs, stupid. I mean, acropore eating flatworms, okay, that's a decent one to be a little concerned about. Dinoflagellates, oh my God, you do not want that. Also in the dino group, I think they emphasize the importance of having some nitrate and some phosphate in the tank, because apparently 0,0 of those two leads to dinoflagellates. And so people try to avoid those. They try to avoid hitting those low numbers. Good. You shouldn't be at 0,0. You should have some nitrate and you should have some phosphate. Phosphate under 0.1 is fine. Nitrate under 20 is fine. Higher numbers, not so fine. So, find that sweet spot, but don't be scared of phosphates. They are not evil. They will not destroy your system. They will not kill your corals. They will not kill your fish. I've had tanks where the auto feeder accidentally dumped a month's worth of food into the tank over the weekend. And I came home from a trip, and the tank was clear, didn't even know, and I look up at the auto feeder and it's just spinning and spinning and spinning, and it's bone dry. It's completely empty. There's nothing in it. And I'm just like, get out the test kit. I measure my phosphates, 3.0. Remember, you want 0.03? Mine is 3.0. So I use Phosphate RX every other day for probably 10 days. And what you do is, as you use Phosphate RX, it will cut the phosphate in half each time if you're using the proper dosage. And so 3.0 became 1.5, but then over the next day or so, it kind of crept up to 2. I did another dose, brought it down to 1. Then it came up to like 1.25 or something like that. I did another dose, brought it down to like 0.8. And then, because once you hit 3.0, the phosphate embeds into the sand and the rock, and as you're trying to remove it from the system, it's coming out of the water column, but it is wicking back out of the sand and out of the rock back into the water. So that's why you have this kind of a stock market effect where it went really high, then you brought it down, then it goes up a little bit, and you bring it down again, and it goes up a little bit, and you just keep working it down till it's all the way down to something under 0.1. And if you're down at 0.1, 0.08, 0.05, that's a great range to be. Don't be scared of it. All right. That's all I can tell you about dinos, because I've never had to experience the joy of it. And hopefully I never will. Hi, Reef King. He's here from the UK. What time is it there? Shaker Breakers Reef, I think you're asking if you have dinos in the sand and you scoop the sand out, could you then bleach it? Is that what you're asking me? And then use a chlorine remover? You probably could. You could wash the heck out of it. You could soak it with bleach like you wanted. You could rinse it. You could use a bottle of Prime and give it a good soak in that. You could then move it into RO water if you want to do that. You can go through all these stages, or you can just go buy some new sand. I think it's just easier to buy new sand. Triggerfish says, it's been a while since we've had a 4-hour stream. I'm just saying. No, I agree. We haven't had these super long ones. And you know, a lot of people, there was several that said, I love the long streams. I enjoy it. I use it while I'm driving my car. And I understand that because I do the same thing. But a lot of people said, I don't have time to watch a 4-hour video about changing the lights on your aquarium. I was like, yeah, I get it. It's really the first 45 minutes. There's lots of Q&A after that. But I talk about so many other things, you'll still benefit. But I understood why people might not want to hit play on a 4-hour video. So Markna will have 24 hours of 1-hour videos, and hopefully everyone will enjoy themselves. I'll stick down the screen again for a second here, because why not? Reef King says, I was fragging zoas and had a cut on my finger, and the pain was so bad for 3 days. I have a cut on my finger from today's endeavor of cleaning off my light fixtures. I did the first light, came out great, put it back up there, took the second one down, and I'm working on cleaning it and put it back up there. And then the third one tried to drop. And I don't want my $900 light to hit the ground, right? So I grabbed it in midair, and it just sliced my finger. So I will not be working in my tank while I have a cut on my finger. I always wait till everything's sealed up tight before I put my arms in the aquarium, because I don't want to get some kind of bacteria inside my skin, inside my bloodstream. You're handling zoas, which we know have we know they have palytoxin in them from Palithoa. And so we want to make sure that we are not handling zoas when we have cuts in our hands. Now, if you have to work on something like that immediately, you can't wait until you're healed, wearing rubber gloves would be smart. And then as soon as you're done, take the gloves off, throw them away, clean your hands with some kind of disinfectant. So I'm sure you have some kind of what do we call it? All these gels we use during COVID to get rid of all the possible contaminants. So if you have anything like some kind of sterilizing gel, use that to clean everything really well. If you want to put peroxide on the cut again, you can. You can put triple antibiotic on it. You can put a Band-Aid on it and wrap it up and know you're safe. I'm sorry that you were hurting for a few days though, and I totally get that. There are lots of times where people have accidents working with zoas. So it's very important that we're very cautious and we keep our mouth shut while we're fragging so that nothing squirts into our mouth. Seriously, a lot of people are just working and their mouth's just kind of hanging open as they're doing something, and then, so we don't want that to happen. You don't want to take your hands you're working with and touch your face. And I remember when COVID hit, they said, don't touch your face. And they also had an article come out that said the average human touches their face 1,000 times in 24 hours. And I think that was written about me. I touched my face all the time. And I said, I'm dead. I'm doomed. There's no way I'm going to survive this. I cannot stop an itch, a scratch, adjust my glasses, whatever. I'm always touching my face. And I had to try really hard to avoid that. And actually, I'm pretty good about it now. I don't know if I learned my lesson or just taught myself a new trick, but I don't manhandle my face like I used to in the old days. I mean, that even includes just doing this while you're reading. That's touching your face. It still counts, So if you're working with pallies, zoanthids and Palithoa, you want to make sure you're not touching your face, you're not wiping your eyes, you're not wiping away your sweat. Julian Sprung talked about how he was working with zoas and got palytoxin poisoning through his palm that had no cuts. Just handling them, it went right through the palm. Now, that's interesting now I'm thinking about it, because I remember reading, I was like, really? Because, I've touched these things a zillion times. I've never had a problem, but I don't sell them. So I'm not touching them as much as Julian might. But there was a guy, his name was Greg, I think it was Scheimer, something like that. He was out of the Boston Reef Club, and he did fragging demonstrations and been doing them for his club forever. Probably did them twice a year for like 12 years in a row. And in the demonstration, he always demonstrated how to use 2-part putty to secure corals to the frag plugs or to the rock work. And so he would demonstrate it by taking the 2 halves of the putty, kneading it together, and of course when you're doing that, it's getting all over your skin. And of course it's going to go in through your skin. It cannot not do it, okay? It's gonna happen. But he had been doing it for so long that apparently his body just hit a tipping point where this was like the final straw. And he went into anaphylactic shock and collapsed on the floor in front of the whole room of hobbyists. And 911 was called, and an ambulance rushed out. They took him away on a gurney, and he survived. I mean, he was okay. The hospital fixed him up. But that ever since that happened, he has recommended to everyone when you're working with two-part putty to put on those cheap disposable gloves first before you mix the putty. Now that I do. I do put on the gloves every time I work with putty because why take the chance? And so the same thing, if you get yourself a box of disposable gloves that are the right size for your hands, you can work on fragging corals and aquascaping and whatever, and you'll avoid getting some little nicks and cuts on your skin as well. So it's a good thing to do. And if you tear one while you're working, peel it off, put a new clean one on, and keep going. But we want to, be cautious around things like this that can possibly injure us in some form or fashion. Do you have a recliner in front of your aquarium? I don't own a recliner. I have 2 chairs and a love seat, and they are all basically pointing toward the aquarium and the television, and it works out fine. But I've never turned the chair specifically to just point at the tank, unless I was trying to take a picture to be funny. Billy says, have you ever kept a Gigantea anemone? I have not. I believe that's one of the ones I've always... Is that the same as Rittery or Ritterai? Because that's the one I've wanted to have for a long time and haven't. And I've told Joe at the 20,000 gallon reef in Long Island, I want one of his. And his are like $1,000. But where am I going to put it? It's such a beautiful animal, but I don't really have a spot for it. Maybe I will have a spot for it. All right, we'll see about that. But anyway, for now, that's the one I want. They're beautiful. They're gorgeous. I've been drooling over those things for like a decade. Billy says, is caulk dosing enough on its own, or do you need to dose magnesium, alkalinity, etc., besides trace, of course? Caulk washer will handle your calcium and your calcium and alkalinity levels when they're correct. So you get them where they need to be, and then you should be able to use caulk washer to maintain them. That is the principle behind it. I don't think it helps that much with magnesium, but I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure it doesn't. But like I said, don't take that as law. You may need to add magnesium if you find it dropping off. And then yes, you do need to add trace elements. Huang says, I've decided to grow green star polyps on 3 sides of my 15-gallon tank. Less glass cleaning. How does that sound? Sounds like fun. There was a guy, man, it looked like it was photoshopped. I mean, nowadays everything's AI, right? But there was a guy that took the time to put green star polyps on the entire bottom of his aquarium, and it literally looked like a lawn. It was all the exact same height. It wasn't curling up the edges. It was just a perfect log, just a lawn with rock on it. I was like, that's amazing. It was such a cool picture. And then someone else, he had green star polyps on the back of his tank, and of course some in his tank. And then there was one hiding the inside of the mag float. It was completely covered. So when he cleaned the glass, look at you just saw this green star polyps moving back and forth on the glass. It was pretty funny looking, but inventive. Obviously, if it tries to grow off the edges, if you aren't moving that thing much, it's going to adhere to the glass and you have to break it free. But if you're trimming it off the edges just to keep it a clean looking magnet, it's pretty funny. Dustin says, have you ever tried any kind of medication in food for a fish that has a hard time maintaining their weight? That's a good question, and I haven't had to do that. But having fish food that is medicated in the first place can help with some internal parasites for the fish. And there's only like 1 or 2 companies that actually make one. I think Polyp Labs makes a medicated food, and possibly Dr. Tim's, but I know that some people will soak fish food in different things like Celcon for the vitamins, and I'm sure there's probably some kind of medication that can be mixed with saltwater, but you're going to have to do some Googling and some research, or talk to a local vet or something like that, and a marine vet would be better, to see what would work and what would actually work underwater. Because a lot of times, whatever you put in there, as soon as it hits the water column, it's going to start dissolving and diluting away really rapidly. So like if it was inside a pellet food, it's more likely to get into the gut of the fish and do some good. So that is kind of what I think you'd be looking for, a medicated pellet food. Reef Dudes is here. Thank you, Reef Dudes, for saying that my tank is lovely. Appreciate that. Lucas says, so what would you do if you have dinoflagellates? Take everything out and swirl it in a bucket? I would probably do, here's what I would do. I have a tank full of dinoflagellates, right? Wall to wall, coast to coast, up the walls everywhere. I would be blowing it off everything to get it in the water column. I would pray that my fish aren't choking to death on this crap that's blowing everywhere. I'd use a net to scoop out as much as I could repeatedly, which I've done with different, cleanings of tanks and pulling out algae and stuff. I'm just netting for like 20 minutes till 90%'s gone, and then I let the last of it get removed with a protein skimmer. But blowing it off everything first of all to get it loose would be my first step. If I had stuff on the walls, I would stop all the flow in the tank, just completely stop the flow. And I would scrape the walls very slowly straight downward. I would just scrape. I want that stuff to just collapse at the bottom in a pile. And then I would take tubing and I would siphon out the pile. And by blowing things off with a power head, you can blow off any dinos off the coral itself and give it some reprieve. But the stuff's in the system. Now there was one technique that was used a while back that might work in a low concentration of dinoflagellates. But in a full-blown system, I don't know they're going to have much success. And that was to use something like 2 milliliters of hydrogen peroxide per 10 gallons of water. And you put that in like every day for 8 days in a row, and it would knock out that little bit that showed up in your tank. But if it was full-blown, I mean, I've never had to deal with it. I went and saw one tank one time. I was on a tank tour or something, or I was visiting somewhere to speak. And they had, let me turn this thing off, it's been on top of my face. They had green dinoflagellate everywhere. It was so bad, and it was so beautiful. It just looked like something out of, now we would say like out of Avatar. It was something made by Disney. It was just so weird and bubbly. I was like, can I take pictures of this? I know you're not happy with your tank. Like, that's fine, go ahead. And I probably took 20 pictures of this stuff, and I have no idea where those pictures are. I have been wanting to someday just sit on my computer and wade through the early 2000s and just go through every picture folder until I find those, because it was crazy looking. I mean, it looked like lava lamp went wild in this guy's aquarium. And but anyway, if it was systemic everywhere, I don't know. I might just start a fresh tank and just restart and dip every coral and try to replant. I don't know. That's kind of how I look at it. But the dinoflagellate support group might tell me exactly what to do, where I could just handle it and resolve the problem. But I hope I never get to that point. Nine o'clock in the UK. Okay, so 6 hours, either 6 hours in the future or 6 hours in the past. Hey, Ruben, how are you? Keith says, why does Reef Tray say anything over 2.0 nitrate is in the red? Yeah, that needs to be adjusted. I'll let them know. Thanks for bringing that up. Let me take a screenshot of that so I don't forget. Because really, you can be, anything under 20 is all right. Okay, I grabbed that. Done. Triggerfish said, any updates on the new stand? Mine is coming along nicely. Unfortunately, my weird neck back problems hit me really hard last Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So 4th of July, I was doing nothing but pills and ice and relaxation, waiting for my neck to kind of resolve. And I don't know, I did something really bad to my neck 2 weeks ago. And I heard this horrible snapping sound that just went from here to here. Like a rubber band just let go. And I'm like, and it hurt so bad. And it took like 20, 30 minutes for that pain to go away. I was like, I don't know what that was. It's never happened before. I don't even know how they could identify what it was. I don't know if it was a muscle, a tendon, a ligament. I have no idea. But anyway, 2 weeks later, I had this really locked up situation. I was pretty miserable. And unfortunately, I've had this problem in my neck for coming up on 15 years. And so my days start off really slow. I get up and I wait 2 or 3 hours for everything to feel right. And then I start my day. Most people get up, have breakfast, and go to work. I don't. But I tend to work later into the day or the evening. And so anyway, I lost those days. I didn't get to work on the stand. And then, of course, when I'm back on my feet, I got to get back to work for customers. So, no progress yet, but I think I might be able to just tackle it today and tomorrow. So we'll see, because I'm feeling kind of decent today. Of course, I'm just a couple pain pills away from feeling great. Thank you, Detroit. Antibacterial gel is what I was trying to think of. Why couldn't I think of that? Thomas says, will my tank be okay for 1 more month without a water change? I'm going in for surgery Monday morning at 8. My right arm can't lift it and move it, and the ligament got torn in 2 places. I'm sorry to hear your arm just continues to be a problem. Your tank will be fine. Listen, I've gone months without a water change. The reason it's good to do a water change is it removes the pollutants and contaminants from the tank. 25% of the tank needs to be changed once a month. That's it. And if you can't get to it for the next month and no one else can help you with it for the next month, it's going to be okay. The worst that can happen is you'll grow some algae. Okay? So all you should do right now is focus on healing. Thank you, Garf. Said in the UK it's 2100, so it's 9 p.m. The proper time. We invented time. I love it. Panopolis says, thoughts on the AliExpress Radeon copy? LOL. Yeah, I only saw one screenshot of it, and I saw the price tag, of course, and it was like a couple $100 or something. Not a big fan of China, y'all. I've been saying this for a long time. I've been saying this for 15 years. We need to buy things in America. Made in America, sold in America. And everything that we buy seems to come from China in some form or fashion. Even my iPhone, even my Mac, the inside pieces, everything has a little piece of China in it. I get that. But here is an example of the kind of thing, and this isn't the first. I've seen other things. I saw stuff. There was a pump that came out from China, and it dropped and released before the official pump came out for the company. I think it was a Tunzi pump that was brand new to the market, and like a few days before Tunzi could announce, here's our new pump, it's here in America, you can buy it. I might be wrong, but I think it was Tunzi. It was released by a company called Fish Street, and it's Chinese-made knockoffs. And the thing looked exactly like a Tunzi, it wasn't the Turbell, it was a Stream. It looked like a Tunzi Stream, but they called it a Vortec. So they had a piece of Ecotech and there was a piece of Tunzi in there, and yet it was a knockoff. And so here's the thing. If you send, you're a company and you're like, I need to make these pumps. I need to make them affordable so I can make money. So if I hire a company in China to build this thing for me, I can get them much cheaper, and then I can make money on every pump I sell. And if I have thousands and thousands of pumps, and I can sell some to BRS at a lesser amount, so BRS can mark it up and sell it to the hobbyist, and to saltwateraquarium.com, and to different people. There's that distribution food chain, right? The problem is China has the blueprint to the product. Now let's say the A shift, the day shift, builds the Tunzi pumps or the Radeon lights or whatever it is. Then it's 5 o'clock, the whistle blows, they all get to go home. I'm assuming they have a perfect schedule in China, right? And then the B shift comes in and they just happen to look at the screen. Huh, they forgot to remove the thumb drive. Those guys are dumb. I'm gonna go ahead and print out 1,000 more of those things and I'm gonna sell them cheaper. And that's kind of what I think it is. I mean, that's just me. That's my theory. I have no proof of this, but I just feel like that's kind of it. You've shown them how to make it. They have all the components. They can just make it slightly different, or they can make it exactly the same, because how is lawsuits going to stop them across international waters? It's just a nightmare. So I have felt for the longest time that we should build things in America. We should quit relying on China. And I've heard stories, like if you were to go into the typical American house and you opened up every single thing in the house, that like 97% of everything in the house was made in China, including things like the outlets in the wall. I went to the fish store once, and at Frank's, and he had a lighter, and it said something like, America, F yeah. You know, something like that was on there. So he bought it because it was patriotic. And I picked up that lighter and I turned it over and it said made in China. And I showed it to him and he's like, I can't believe it. And he just threw it in the trash. He was trying to buy an American lighter. He liked it, had the American flag and said, America, yeah! And yet it was made in China. So, same thing. You buy an American flag, a lot of them are made in China. It's crazy. Everything is made in China. And, you know, we keep sending money there. That's been an ongoing little rant of mine for a super long time. I would like to see that change. And I hear things like, well, it costs too much to make it in America. I guess it would. I guess it would cost too much. And it would make that thing cost even more for you to buy it. And then you would hate the price and you would say, I don't want to buy it. You know, that's kind of like getting wild-caught fish from the ocean versus captive-bred, tank-raised fish that cost more. You're getting a fish that was raised in an aquarium that will definitely do better in an aquarium because it wasn't scooped out of the ocean and you're transitioning it into a captive environment. But it might be cheaper to get a mandarin from the ocean than it is to buy one from Biota or some other company. So then you're saying, well, my dollars matter. I only have this much income. I can't afford to buy from Biota. I have to buy it from the ocean. Well, it's the same thing with China. And so now you've got knockoff lights. When your light breaks from AliExpress, maybe you can contact them and they'll send you another one. Maybe they'll ignore you. When you buy a light from Ecotech, or you buy it from Me Loves Reef, or Saltwater Aquarium, or BRS, or one of these other companies, Ecotech customer support takes care of you. They're not going to fix an AliExpress light that looks like theirs. So there is that. But you might say, I saved so much money, I don't need product support. I'll just buy another one because it's dirt cheap. See, that's that. You have to decide what's best for you. But I feel like supporting that kind of stuff. I mean, look, there's another thing that just came to market. Again, driving business to China. It's a new app that came out probably 7 months ago, called Temu. I have seen ads about it on my Facebook for so long, I finally told Facebook, don't show me this ad ever again. And they stopped. But I was like, what is the deal with this Temu? Why am I constantly being hammered with it? So I Googled it to find out a little bit more about this company. So it's a free app. It was the #1 app available in the App Store, which means everyone's downloading it and everyone's using it. And what they're doing, according to 2 articles I read, so it wasn't just I read one article and yeah, it's fact. They would sell things insanely cheap. Like you'd see, I don't know, a thing for your desk to hold all your pencils and Scotch tape and all that for like $1. You know, $2. And you're like, that's crazy. If I go to Office Depot, it's like 20 bucks for that thing. I can get that for $2? And so people were buying these things super cheap with probably a 10 to 14 day wait for it to arrive from China. And they said, okay, well, I don't care if I have to wait. I'm saving so much money. Well, what was happening was, #1, in the beginning, people were getting what the picture looked like. But then after a while, they just give you whatever because you're not going to be able to do anything from America. You can't go after them and go knock on their door and say, hey, you gave me the wrong thing. And sending them an email is not going to necessarily get you any kind of reprieve. I'm telling you, this is how it is. So then they started this whole affiliate program where if one person would get on their social media and talk about all this cool stuff they got from Temu, and other people were to sign up and start using it with their affiliate code, the person that promoted would get $300, $400 worth of stuff for free. So it's kind of a pyramid thing. I was like, wow. I mean, you can't stop this freight train. It's going to happen. People are going to say, I can buy this cheaper. I don't have to go to Walmart where the imported stuff from China is on the shelves because I can get it straight from China and put Walmart out of business. That's kind of where Temu is right now, according to what I read. Feel free to do the Google dive yourself and see what you read. Reef King says, how long has your tank been running? Do you still have the anemone tank? Okay, 2 questions, you get 1 answer. The reef is coming up on 10 years this November. Yes, Joe has the amazing orange Ridori, and that's what I want. I totally want that thing. The tentacles are like this tall and like this thick. I really want that. Rick says, I can't wait for Markna. I love long streams and could listen all day. It will literally be 1 whole day. So forget about sleeping. It's not going to happen. Terry says, you know, since you said you never had to deal with dinos, you have upset the jinx gods, and your next tank will have them. Such a rookie move. You know, I've also said that I've never crashed a tank, and I've said that repeatedly, and I continue to this day of never having a tank crash. Of course, the definition of crashing a tank is losing everything, and I've never lost everything. I have lost half my fish population once by turning off the pumps overnight, like an idiot, when I was supposed to be feeding corals and just went to sleep. And I lost a bunch of corals to a lack of potassium 2 years ago, but I had 50% of my reef was completely fine, and all the fish were fine. And I had to actually remind myself, even though I lost a bunch of things I cared about, half of it was completely normal because I didn't care about potassium. And, you know, after a couple of months, I resolved the potassium issue, and my whole tank came back to life, and that's why I have this beautiful thing behind me. So I'm not tempting the gods. I'm just saying I watch my tank, and, you know, eventually, yes, my luck will run out, but for now, it's still going strong. I didn't go to Wrap New York. I stayed here. I took care of my channel. I was on YouTube. You missed last week's live stream. But it sounded like it was a nice event. HC Aquatics Reefing says, gyres or vortex, and why? I love the vortex. I have been running vortex on my tank since 2006. I actually had one of the original beta models before they became the official perfect model. I remember because the case was blue and plastic, and there was like a rubber pad that went between the vortex and the glass that was orange. And then later on, you know, they came out with a white case for the driver, and they had a black pad that went behind, you know, between the motor and the glass. I love the vortex. I love putting them on the side of the tank and having very little in the tank. I mean, in this video right now, you can just, right there, you can see the corner of one vortex right there, barely, in the frame. I have 3 vortex on the tank, and I have 2 return nozzles. That's it. And I don't have a bunch of gear in the tank. I had to help someone clean their tank about 2 months ago. I was going to say not long ago, that had 6 gyres and the water wasn't moving at all. And they hadn't been cleaned in forever, obviously. And I spent hours cleaning 6 gyres and reassembling those things. It was a puzzle project. I mean, it was not fun to build. And I don't know if it was just harder because it was so dirty, but I was using muriatic acid. So, I mean, I was knocking it out. And when I was done, that tank was just a zillion bubbles and a ton of detritus because I kicked up a storm getting 6 gyres to run. But they're big, and they ruin the view. I just don't like the look of them. I don't want anything in my tank. I don't want vortex. I don't want anything. I want invisible pumps that hover at the right spot, but I can't see them. And if I start to see them because they're getting dirty, I'll take them out and clean them and put back my invisible pump. That's what I want. But, you know, we can't have that, unfortunately, at this time. Maybe in 2035 we'll have those. But for now, you gotta have something. Now others have said they don't like the motor hanging on the outside of the tank. They find that to be ugly. For me, it's one round little thing. It's this big, this round. I'm like, I can live with that. It's like nothing. I mean, it's just like nothing to me. And it's easy to, you know, take apart and clean. It's easy to put back in place. You can move it to a different spot. You can lift up higher if you need to during a power outage and you're on battery backup to churn up the water and add air bubbles into the water column. I mean, it's just such a nice wide flow. It's not directional. You can't point it at something. That's why people like Tunzi and Seiche and even gyres, so they can direct the flow a certain direction. For me, you got water blowing and you got water going back into it to blow more. So you've got the ebb and flow. I had to make sure I had that right. It ebbs in, and I'm telling you, when I turn off my return pump every single night to feed the fish, and I do that every night for 10 minutes, I hit the button, the water breaks the siphon instantly, and so no water drains out of the tank, right? I mean, just a fraction. Then I bring over the fish food and I pour it in. I pour it in over there, actually, right there, in that spot in the back. And as the water hits the column, I see the ebb suck the food into the vortex. Even if I have food floating on the surface, the vortex will draw that food down into the vortex and blow it into the reef. And I've been running these things forever. I've had them for so long. I love them. There's other things on the market. There's things that cost more that I could buy, so I could be extra fancy and be even more disconnected from the average hobbyist. But they're kind of bigger and an eyesore. And I prefer things that take up minimal space in the tank itself. I don't like a lot of things in the tank. I want an aquascape and I want corals. That's what I want. And fish, of course. But I don't want to have a bunch of power heads and pumps and heaters and wires and tubes and all that stuff in the tank. It just kind of ruins the look. Even that one wire hanging down in the background, that shouldn't be there. It should just be pristine. Of course, my tank is peninsula style, so there's always something you can see in the background. But if I had a black background, you wouldn't see that at all. And if you had a Vortec on a black background, it blends in as long as it's clean. I like that. Same with a gyre. You can clean a gyre, make it look nice and pristine, and make it blend in with black. That's fine too. But I just found that the cleaning process of the gyre was more intricate by comparison to the Vortec. And it's bigger. I mean, it's a big, long thing. Now, they came out with like half a gyre. I think they call it a blade or something like that. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting because you could put it down low and have it move water behind the rockwork and kind of bring the water around the front of the tank and back to the back. I thought that's kind of cool. So I was glad to see that because it's something you could hide. But most people want the power heads up high, like usually high, midpoint, low point, to blow water across the corals to keep them clean. So you have to have some things that are going to be visible, unfortunately. There's just no way to hide it all. So, hope that helped. Baker's Reef says, I missed it in the video, but how old was your Trident and what exactly was wrong with it? Mine is approaching 2.5 years. At 2 years, I did the Neptune service. So, I didn't know the date of it. I told them that in the ticket. I just said, been a couple of years. I have no idea about the purchase date. Maybe you can find it in your records because I buy and sell a lot of Neptune gear to my customers. And so I'm buying things as well for myself. And I just gave them the serial number, so I thought maybe they could look it up that way. I don't know. But what mine was doing was it said test A fail, and I'm used to that. That happens. So I went and checked the reagent bottle, and it was like this much full still. I mean, it wasn't low. It still had probably 10 days worth of reagent, so I knew that wasn't the problem. So I did the prime A, and then I think I did alkalinity test, and it said test A fail again. I was like, ugh. So then I thought, well, who can I call? And I thought maybe I should just do a trouble ticket. But then when I was on Neptune's website, I found that they had an area, in the customer support area. There was something like, I can't remember the exact wording, but it was basically frequently asked questions about products. And so I went and found Trident, and I found, what it said to do. And what it said was get your sample line and hook it up to a syringe and push hot water through it and make sure the little pre-filter is also clean too. So I blasted through it with the tubing and the water went through it fine. And the pre-filter, it was a little bit mucked up and I blew through that with the hot water as well. I could blow through it. I was like, okay, it's all clear. And then I did, prime sample. I did prime sample like 5-6 times and it kept saying water sample fail. And I was like, oh. So first I had test A fail and now I have water sample fail. And I said, I don't know what to do. And I looked in the back, and everything looked completely normal. There was no weird spot. There's no liquid in the bottom. Couldn't understand it. So I decided, let's just open up a ticket. And I wrote them an email, and I just said, I tried to troubleshoot it myself. I also followed your FAQ of what to do about the tubing. And then I got a reply back, probably within the hour, that said, you should clean the tubing. And so I wrote back, yes, I cleaned the tubing. I already did that. I said that in the first email. And then, nothing, because, it's the end of the day. The next day I get an email, and I was totally expecting him to say, okay, I'm going to want you to take it. Oh, he also wants some pictures of the vial where the reagent happened. He wanted to see the picture of where the red dot is and where the hole is. He wanted to see that part. And so I sent those pictures. I also sent a little video of it trying to run, and it just wasn't moving any water. So he could see all that. I stuck the video up on YouTube for him. And I guess he saw the pictures and watched everything, and he said, we're sending you another one. And I was like, oh. I thought, okay, I'm getting a refurbed one. I mean, that's it. I mean, I'll just send back this one, whatever. I really thought he'd say, okay, I want you to remove the case. I want you to disconnect this. I want you to take all these tubes off. I mean, I thought I was going to have to go into full surgery mode. And he just said, we're replacing it. I said, okay. So someone mentioned in the comments, not all of us something along the lines of us commoners just don't get a free one. I don't know that I got a free one either. Neptune has my credit card on file, basically, and I buy so much stuff, there's a very good chance I've already been billed. I don't even know. If they replace it for free, that's awesome. But if they charge me, I won't be surprised. They get my money regularly, and I buy enough product that I guess they're taking care of me at the same time. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I won't know until my CPA breaks it down. But I was really excited to get a brand new one because I totally expected just a used one that works, one that's been refurbished. And I was like, okay, I'm just getting a new one, And when I saw, I was like, ooh, this is in the wrapper. I'm going to make an unboxing video finally, because I never did one on that one product. I mean, there's a lot of things I haven't unboxed. And there's a few things I've unboxed that I could never release because it never came to market. So I have some of those old videos that are pointless, But yeah, that was a wild one. But I plugged in, it's worked perfectly. Let me see. Well, you're on my phone. Let me open up the browser and see what it says it is right now. But it's been measuring all the things. And right now it shows alkaline's at 8.7. And calcium's 429 and magnesium's 1466. And that's pretty close to what I get with my test kits. So no surprises there. It's been running fine. It's nice to have that back on there because it is what keeps me in tune with my calcium reactor. So I totally rely on the Trident to make sure that I don't have any surprises. And because it measures alkalinity 4 times a day, I have lots of opportunities to step in if there's a need. And usually I get the notification, and then I go look at the Versa pump. I'm like, that tube! And I have to swap it out with a new tube and adjust the calibration again, and then everything levels out again. But I don't just have this thing where I change the tube once a month or once every 2 months. I just do it when I get a notification. So I don't know if that helped answer your question, but it just, like I said, I boxed up everything that I had from the old one, including the tubing, and I sent it back to them. They can notify me with what they determined, or they may never tell me another word. I have no idea. Oh, Rafe King, I'm sorry to hear that. He said, I've got a slip disc in my back 10 years ago and still have back pain. Yeah, I was in a hit and run car accident, or, well, it wasn't car accident, but I was not in a car. I was on a moped, and I got run over by a getaway driver. And I initially didn't go to the hospital. Then I went there just long enough to get staples in my head to seal up what was cracked open. But I didn't stay there for anything else. So who knows if maybe way back then, all the stuff in my neck had begun to fall apart, and I just never knew. Santana Reef, it's okay. You don't have to be first. But I'm glad you're here. Happy Saturday. Reef King, you may not have any shows in the UK, but you're about to have Markna. And you're going to have it for as many hours as you can stay awake. And part of it will be during your daytime hours, which will be really nice. Panopolis says, is there going to be an update on Tammy's tank? Tammy took her tank down. It's gone. I do have video footage, so there is a chance I could do something with that. I had filmed it on 2 different devices, and I only had half the footage on one, and I couldn't find the other half. And so that's one of the reasons it never got produced, because I was trying to track down the other stuff and kind of build it, and it was just kind of it was a mess, and it was just like one of those things. It was such a headache. I just didn't do anything with it. But she moved to a different house. She got a new tank. It was going to be fish only. Then this pipe burst in the wall, which they fixed. This is a brand new house, too. I was shocked that the pipe burst, from a freeze. And then the pipe burst in basically the same area, like a year or 2 later, and this time flooded the entire home. Flooded the entire lower level, to where they removed all of the kitchen cabinets, because it went right through that area. The appliances got removed from the kitchen, all the cabinets were taken out, all the floors were taken out, all the floors through the entry, and where the new aquarium was, that got taken out. She said, I'm done with all of it. And she got new floors put in, a new kitchen rebuilt in this new house, because of, this time it just really flooded the wrong direction, and it really wrecked her home. So it's really sad seeing her leave, because she was so good at what she did. Paul says, do you miss not having large angelfish in your tank? No, I've never had large angels. It's never been a thing. I really like dwarf angels, and apparently a pygmy. My tank right now has a coral beauty. At one point I had a flame angel, and then one day it vanished. I'm assuming the sea bay had it for dinner because I never found a body. But you know, the cleanup crew could have taken care of it like that. Same with my big red-legged starfish. But I've never been one to get the things that I mean, there's so many beautiful angels out there, but a lot of them are not coral friendly, and I'm a coral guy. So I tend to pick fish that'll work well with the corals I own. Hey, Amy. Nice to see you here. She's looking at her gyro cords. That is another perk of the Vortec, by the way. You don't have any power inside the tank. No wires going inside. You do have the wire on the outside, and you should definitely glue the outside cable to the tank. And listen, those little sticky pads that you get, they're always for free. They come with every pump. They don't hold. So whenever you're having to glue something on the side of your tank, first clean the area with rubbing alcohol if the tank is glass. If the tank is acrylic, clean it with a swipe of acetone. Just, that's it, one swipe. Don't go rubbing it in and mess up your acrylic. But you can clean the surface with some acetone, you can spray it on a towel and go, and then you can now glue the sticky pad on there. But the sticky pads just have the worst 3M tape on them. It's like the cheapest garbage version of, I mean, there's much better 3M tape out there on the market. What I have done successfully for a long time, I buy this, a different type of, I think it's 3M also. It's a red tape, the plastic on the tape, it's double-sided, and the tape itself is dark gray. And the plastic that's on it, you know, so you can like peel it off the roll, is red. And it's made for wet environments. So I will clean the area first, and then I'll take my little sticky pad, and if it's a brand new sticky pad, I'll peel off that little piece of paper, that little piece of wax paper, and I put a piece of that gray tape on there and cut it so it looks perfect, and it's dark brown or dark gray, and I peel off that red obviously, and I put it on there, and it never comes off. Never comes off. It's fantastic. It's so durable. If you wanted to get crazy, you could scrape off the garbage 3M and put that red one directly on it and put that on, it'll hold forever. But recently, because I make those Vortec cradles that hang on the side of the MP60, still haven't done any for the MP40s, guys. But the one for the MP60, I put a clear double stick tape that is the stickiest tape on the market. I found it on Amazon, I buy it by the roll, and I've been using that for, and it's even stickier than the red 3M I like so much that I got at Home Depot. So I think a roll of that stuff from Amazon is like $8 or $13. And you know, it's a pretty long piece. I mean, you could do a lot of projects with one roll. So if you wanted to use something that holds on, I had one person buy the Vortec cradle. It's just a little acrylic thing that has like a little hook that holds up the motor. And so when you take off the wet side to clean it, the outside just sits there in the cradle. It doesn't move. And you bring your new one in or your clean one and you put it back and back into place and you're done. I love that thing. Well, I use that tape on there and I send it off to my customers. And this one customer wrote me an email and says, "Hey Mark, where did you get that tape? Because I need more of it, because I was trying to remove the bracket to relocate my Vortec to a new spot, and it was a 180-gallon tank." And he says as he was pulling, the whole tank was moving. I was so impressed. I loved that. And then Mr. Saltwater Tank sent me an email because he bought quite a few of them. And he says, "Am I the first one who came loose?" And he showed me a kind of a dirty one. And I was shocked because, like I said, this other guy, when he pulled on it, the aquarium moved. That's how well it held. So how would marks come off so easily? And I was very surprised because of that. And so I said, "Well, did you clean the area first with rubbing alcohol?" He says, "No, I just cleaned the glass with a sponge." So the glass was not clean enough for a good bond. So that's why it's so important to always clean the area first. I've been doing this forever. Anytime I stick anything anywhere, I prep the area before I glue the thing on. And so for me, it's second nature. You know, rubbing alcohol is almost always my first choice. And that way I put something on, it's there forever. And I don't have to worry. I did the same thing when I had a fan bracket that I need to put on my sump. I had this old sump under my 400-gallon, and I wanted a cooling fan blowing down on the water, but I had nowhere to put like a long bracket that could sit in there like normal. So I made a small one with a little lip on the side. And then I got that magic red 3M tape from Home Depot, and I put 2 long strips on the flat part, and I cleaned the top of my sump with the acetone, and I put that thing down, just pressed, And I popped my fan in there and plugged it in, and boom, I was done. It was great. And that thing never came off. And then when it was time to get rid of the sump, I tried to pry it off, and it was like trying to break the acrylic. I was like, wow, so impressive. So always use something that's going to hold forever. So back to the Vortec, you've got the motor with the cord coming up. Get a really good double stick tape, stick the thing on the top, and then feed the wire to the back and behind your aquarium. And that way, if for some reason they ever separate, the motor won't fall to the ground and damage the bearings because it's a very expensive pump. And we want that motor to last forever. And my last MP60s, they lasted me for 10 years before I replaced them. And I only replaced them because they were 10 years old, not because they were broken. I was like, 10 years is enough. I'm getting a new pair. I called up Ecotech and said I need to place an order. And I ordered that along with other things for the shop. And then, put them on. People are like, why would you replace ones that work? It's like, because I don't need them to break when I'm traveling. It's just time. It's sort of like, I didn't wait till my last car exploded before I got a new one. I had it for 14 years. It ran fine. I didn't have big expenses like replace the transmission, replace the motor, replace the this, replace the that. I just said, you know what? I got 149,000 miles out of here. I bet at 150 it's just going to go. So I'm just going to get a new car now while I can drive into a lot and I can potentially haggle, which I'm bad at. And if I don't like what they tell me, I can drive away because I'm not stuck, painted into a corner. And I loved that I had that freedom. And it's sort of the same principle. It's like I just wanted to get this thing replaced on my terms, not because it broke on the 4th of July and everything's closed. So that's what I did. Titus says, what do you think of the conspiculatus angelfish? Gorgeous. It's one of my favorites. It's so beautiful. And, those adults, when they're like this big, there's a tank at the Dallas World Aquarium here, in Dallas, that I think has 5 in there. And every time I visit, I go to see the conspics because they're so beautiful. Now, Poma Labs was breeding little tiny itty bitty ones, and I was like, man, do I want one. And I saw them at MACNA when they did the big reveal. That was probably 5 years ago. And that little fish was like $4,000. I was like, So, don't have a conspic. But I do like visiting them. Bay Area Reef says, are you still building sumps? Yes, I still build custom sumps. I don't have like a sump line where people can just go buy them willy-nilly, but I should make that part of my thing because that would help business. Wilmar says, yes, the Home Depot red double-sided tape is the best. Water can't mess with it. It's literally made for wet environments. Doesn't mean you can stick it on something wet, but it can handle the humidity and the moisture and it won't break down. That's what I like so much about it. Oh, Ruben, thanks for saying that. He said, this is a live stream, educational and inspiring, not like the PRS geeky videos. That's a lot of rambling. Milev is the man. I don't know, I ramble a lot. Would never miss any of these streams, just love them. Thank you very much for saying that. HC Aquatics says, I need some of that gray tape to hold my wallet closed when I'm at the fish store. No, you need to open your wallet and give it to the fish store because they need to stay open and in business. We do need to support our local fish stores so we can continue going there and shopping there and also go there when we have emergencies and tragedies because we need to have their support. And if you don't have one near you, it's so much harder. And listen, I see a lot of comments from a lot of hobbyists, and so often I hear about people that say there's nothing within 2 hours of me. And I'm so lucky to have one I can walk to. It's that close. And then I have another one that's 2 miles away I can drive to. And then there's another, 24 more I can drive to all over Dallas, Fort Worth, Arlington, Denton, all these little suburbs. There's a ton of stores out here. And so I'm lucky. California has a zillion of them. It's like there's one on every block. So some people are really blessed and other people are in the middle of nowhere. And it's crazy that there's so much salt water in the Dallas-Fort Worth area when we're, kind of landlocked. If you ignore the ocean down to the Gulf, we're 5 to 9 hours away from the ocean depending where you're going south. Okay, so we're not anywhere close to water, and yet we have a lot of aquariums here. Bay Area Reefs, you can just email me at sales@melevsreef.com. So SALES and then melevsreef, MELEVSREEF.com. And I will reply to you with what it'll cost. Panopolis says, would one change Purigen as often as carbon or more often? I think that you replace Purigen when it's not removing your nitrate, right? So if your nitrate going in is 80 and it's coming out 80, it's done. If it's going in at 80 and coming out 12, it's still good. I don't know that there's a specific timeline. I'm comparing Purigen to Nitrate R from Brightwell because that's the one I've used. And I was told they're identical. So, I mean, I don't know if that's even true. But if it's true, you want to know what's coming out of your reactor to know if it's still effective or not. And that's the same with GFO. GFO in a GFO reactor, to remove phosphate, you should measure the output. And if the output is coming out the same as it's going in, that media is done. It's not resin. That media is done and needs to be replaced. But if it's coming out nice and low or even at 0, it's still doing its job. Now, I did try GFO for 9 months, so I have a little bit of practice with it, but I hated it. I hated the whole thing. But I do know that back then, and I don't think this changed, that when you had, let's say your phosphate's going in at 1.0, and it's coming out at 0.1. Okay, that's good. Every drop coming out is way lower than what's going in. And eventually that's cycling through that reactor over and over a few 100,000 times. If you bring the whole tank down to 0.1. But here was the thing, that if it was coming out at 0.1, or let's say it was coming out at 0.5, okay, and it's not coming down low enough, you could slow the flow a little bit more and then measure again to get it closer to like 0.25 or 0.2 or 0.1. So, but you don't want to go so slow that the stuff turns stagnant or that the media turns to a brick. It's supposed to barely move, but you also want to measure the output. And they would just, you know, if you have your output kind of fast in the beginning where it's kind of really coming out in a stream, then you would measure your output. And if it's not pulling out enough, slow it down some to where it's pulling out more through every pass of the media. Fosgard, I can't answer. I don't know. Yeah. Amy says, that's why it's so easy for you to do a fish store wine tour. You know, we haven't really done a lot of wine on these. It's usually beer and some hard lemonades. But yeah, we do the annual bus tour. It's a lot of fun, and we visit 5 or 6 stores. And we're in the vehicle, you know, all day long. You know, we're in the stores and the vehicles all day long. The fun thing about the bus tour is that we all meet at a common location, and we all hop onto this chartered bus. And it's air conditioned. We have drinks. We have a designated driver that take care of that, so we don't have to worry about it. And as we buy our livestock, it goes into huge coolers in the belly of the bus. And then at the end of the day, we all remove our livestock and we go home. We deal with the acclimation or we deal with quarantine. And it's just a nice social thing. And what I like is right in the middle, there's a stopping point where we'll have barbecue or something. And we all just have a really nice cookout, and then we get back to it. Our club's done a lot of fun things. I remember years ago, we haven't done this in forever, we did a pumpkin carving contest in a park. We rented this local area, and we came with like a truck full of pumpkins, and everyone got to carve out different looking things. And some people are artistic and did the Little Mermaid. And then I was just trying to make a Maxima clam, which was not easy. And barely was recognizable. Probably looked like something else. But it was fun to do that with others and just be in this group. And then, of course, we had barbecue and we hung out, and it was just a social gathering. And, you know, social gatherings, they don't happen as much anymore. So, kind of miss those things. All right. Why don't we transition to this and remind you that it is time to test your water. It's Saturday, water test Saturday. I've already had my Trident do some testing for me, but I'm going to break out the test kits and see what everything else is. I want to see my nitrates, phosphates. I want to check my salinity, double check that it's close to 35 ppt. Oh, speaking of that, see, this is the part where you all hit stop. Oh, he's going to talk about water testing. There was a guy on Facebook yesterday that got a brand new refractometer, and he got the refractometer calibration solution that's 35 ppt. He put it on there, and he adjusted to 0. And then when he made his salt, he went to measure salt water, it was measuring like 3. And he said, this thing doesn't work. And so he calibrated 2 or 3 times and said, I don't understand what's going on, but when I put my salinity inside a swing arm hydrometer, that the number was off like 1.030 or higher. And I was thinking, how strange is that? I was wondering if he was, so a refractometer is a device you look through, like a little telescope. And there's a cover plate that sits on top. You flip it up, you put your drops of water, then you fold the thing down to look through. And I thought that maybe he was putting the drops on the plate and didn't lift the little lid up, because I mean, this made no sense. But someone else caught what he did wrong. Did you catch it? Did you figure it out? He put the 35 ppt solution on the lens, and then he adjusted the screw to 0 when he should have adjusted the screw to 35 ppt, because it is 35 ppt calibration solution. And that is the correct method and the correct solution to use. So many people are preaching to use RO water or distilled water to calibrate your refractometer down to 0, and that is the wrong end of the scale. We don't care about what happens at 0. We care about what's happening in our range. When you calibrate a pH probe, do you calibrate it to 0? Or do you calibrate it between 7 and 10 because we want it to be 8.3, 8.2, 8.1? We calibrate around the range we want. So you want 35 ppt calibration solution, and that's just cheap. You buy a bottle for like $8 and you use it. Now don't use the same bottle for the rest of your life. Every couple of years, remove it, get rid of it, get a new bottle. Because each time you open it, a speck of evaporation occurs. It slightly alters the chemistry of the water. But you use it 2 or 3 times, because how often do you calibrate your refractometer? Even if you calibrate it every single month for 12 months in a row, you used 36 drops out of a bottle this big. So you still have so much left. Toss it, get a new bottle for the new year. When you're buying a new test kit, get yourself a new calibration bottle and calibrate to 35 ppt on your refractometer. And that way, when you're looking through and you're checking, you want to either look at ppt or you can look at the specific gravity configuration on the other side of the screen, and you're looking for 1.0265. So he was told that, he was just measuring, he was setting to 0 instead of 35. He made the correction, he says, boom, it's working perfectly. And he says, why did I do that? Because everyone told me to calibrate to 0. And he said, there's so much bad information on Facebook. And he's not wrong. So that's one of those things. And another thing that happens with bad information on Facebook, you hear that 35 all the time, 35 ppt, 35 ppt. So one person calibrated or was mixing their salt water to 1.035 because they thought 35, because they kept hearing that number when it's 1.026. So if you're going to go with specific gravity, the true number for 35 ppt is 1.0265. So 1.026 and a half is going to be the same as 35. So if you can calibrate your refractometer, you'll know that your numbers are correct. Calibrate it, check your tank 2 or 3 times, make sure you get the same number repeatedly, and now you can say, all right, repeatedly. Then you'll know your tank is the right salinity. And if it's not and you need to add more salt, you can. If your tank is too salty, you can remove some salt water and put in some fresh water to adjust the levels to get in that sweet spot again. But we want to have good salinity. We want to have the right alkalinity, somewhere between 8 and 11 DKH. We want to have our calcium between 375 and 450. We want to have our magnesium between 1280 and 1400. I actually like 1400. That's a really good number for Montipora. And phosphate under 0.1. Nitrate under 20 would be good. And if you have a potassium test kit, we want to be a minimum of 400 ppm in your tank, which is a lot. So odds are you're at 345, 360. You probably need to add some potassium to your tank. And then of course there's other things you need to add to your tank, like iodine and manganese and molybdenum. And these are things you would add if you were doing an ICP test, which is what you mail out. I sell ICP tests on my website. If you need one, let me know. I'll be happy to ship one to you for the low, low price of $6 shipping. And you will have that ability to know what all your major and minor trace elements are. I love the Reef Labs website that helps you interpret the data. And they even have a spreadsheet to help you calculate how to put in what's lacking to get that sweet spot. All right, that is it. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you again next Saturday. Bye.